Welcome to the behind the scenes for the bad actor. This week I want to focus on how I keep costs down while animating very fast. First scene first. I embrace the scale. Lots of the props I use are common things I have laying around the house, and I never try to hide that. By setting my story in the city of games, I'm able to use the board games I already have as building for this intro shot. That isn't just cheap, it's also interesting. If people are looking for their favorite game in the background, they are not nitpicking my admittedly rough animation. This shot isn't even animated. I just swooped the camera through the setup on a selfie stick, but I think it establishes mood and setting well. The office set is made from half a box that producer Ann built out for me. It is wallpapered with a $1 piece of poster board from the dollar store, which is exactly how my normal office is built. The only requirement I gave her was that it needed to have a labeled door, a window with blinds, they're a Noir staple, and that my normal desk needed to be used. The murder board was her innovation. The pins are, in fact, straight pins, which makes the back just as murderous as the front. Now let's talk Noir. The first episode of this series parodied Dragnet, and Dragnet isn't a noir. It's a reaction against noir storytelling. A behind-the-scenes video isn't the place to get into it, but let me know if you're interested in the detective fiction family tree. Some parts look the same, tough guys in brimmed hats shown in black and white, but under the hood, they are completely different. This episode, however, is a straight noir. I rewatched The Third Man, The Maltese Falcon, and Cowboy Bebop to get the aesthetic and find specific shots I wanted to quote. Dragnet is all about simple shots that can be easily edited together. In contrast, in Noir, you compose like you are painting a painting. Put stuff in the foreground. Avoid simple parallel lines unless you're using them to trap a character. Use silhouettes. And, speaking of contrast, get so very aggressive with lighting and shadows. I would argue that lighting matters more in a noir than any other type of film. But because it is so important, it's actually surprisingly easy to do. In most types of film, if someone notices the lighting, you've done something wrong. You want it to be natural. Fade into the background. Noir ain't got time for natural. Hard lights are the rule of the day. I have a pair of cheap LED panels, they're $15 a piece on Amazon, that I use for my normal shooting. I still use them on this a bit as fill lights and to create the window glow, but I did a ton of work with a flashlight to get hard shadows. Do I recommend flashlights for normal lighting? Lord, no. But noirs are not normal. I also put a piece of tape over the end of the flashlight with a shaped hole to be able to highlight faces. This is called a cookie in industry speak, and I was planning to do a more elaborate one to create the classic window slat look, but in the end, I just didn't need it. That's actually my next budget animation tip. Planning is easier and cheaper than shooting. I always have extra ideas for extra gags. If a shot isn't working, I generally have a backup, so I just switch to plan B. I try to avoid ever sending good time or resources after bad. If it doesn't work on the first try, I cut sling and move on. It can be painful to take extra time in prep, but time spent in reconnaissance is rarely wasted. The street shot is one where a mix of planning and flexibility paid off. Originally, I had thought I would shoot a short bit of street and then loop the footage, like when Scooby-Doo is running from a ghost. However, when I started to build the street, I realized that I had way more gags than would fit in a short run. And Scooby-Doo loops rely on the background being kind of boring, so you don't notice the repeats. I didn't want to do that. So I just built a set large enough to incorporate most of the gags and save time using this shooting rig. I mounted the models, the camera, and the lights to a base plate. Instead of having to worry about each character executing a full walk cycle while keeping the camera tracking along and keeping everything lit, I just needed to pull the sled along and worry about acting. Each frame I move either Wormkey, the bad actor, or the sled. There is always movement on screen, so it's not clear how little I'm really doing. But it turns out just fine at actual speed. I was able to build that sled because of these little guys. I took some old Lego plate and cut the studs off with a utility knife. I also shaved some undercuts on the side to make it easier to separate them from base plates. Most camera equipment uses 1/4 inch by 20 threading, which you can get from any hardware store. I got a big bag of bolts for like 70 cents and used an iPhone holder from an old broken tripod. Dab of hot glue, and I have a Lego eye-level camera. I actually planned on the cafe door being a whole separate shot, but the sled was working so well that I just went with it and extended the street to make it a oneer. I'm actually all the way under my desk to make this work. The whole sequence reminds me of one of the most important pieces of advice I got back when I was in the Army. The plan is nothing, but planning is everything. This shot is not what I planned for, but I could not have gotten it to work without all the planning. Inside the cafe, I'm shooting in front of a TV like I talked about last time. I'm happy with it, but the limitations of my equipment are showing. I shoot on an iPhone 13 mini. That is, by the way, old enough that you can't even buy one from Apple anymore. In general, it works fine, but it is resistant to manual focus control. I know I could use a different photography app, but there's only so many hours in a day. I would love to have the background in focus on some of these shots while the characters talk in the foreground, so that you can see Dry Bones serving drinks back there. But it took too long to make that work, and so I ditched the shot. All right, last thing to talk about. This is my first video that I made from the ground up using DaVinci Resolve. For those of you that don't know, there are basically 3 video editors that commonly get recommended to YouTube creators on a budget. iMovie is the default that comes on Macs, and it's a great little program, but very limited. On the other end of the spectrum is DaVinci Resolve, which is built on top of a high-end Hollywood color grading software, and as such is very full-featured. CapCut, I know some of you know where this story ends, just bear with me, is sort of in the middle with pretty good features, but it's lightweight enough that you can run it on a phone. I'm the sort of person that likes taking the middle path, so I downloaded CapCut when I started this channel. CapCut is not a great program. I had problems with its stability early on, and then features started disappearing behind a paywall. I made the call to switch before the US government decided to ban it. CapCut is made by ByteDance, same Chinese company that makes TikTok. And I can now say, outside of the political stuff, that DaVinci Resolve really is the better program. To anyone who is still sticking with CapCut, download Resolve and give it a shot. There's a learning curve, but it is better over here. Thanks for watching this behind-the-scenes episode of Empirically Good. Next week, we'll have a regular episode tracking down the Systemic Gang. Thanks.